Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I am Patti Callahan Henry.
And I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, librarians, and readers like you. Tonight, Mary Kay and I are thrilled in a thriller kind of way to welcome Hanff Korelitz to discuss her new novel, The Sequel. The book was just released on October 1st, and we are so excited to speak with Jean about it.
But first, we have a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community at friendsandfiction.com.
There you'll find our show schedule, details on upcoming person events, of which we have 4 in the next couple months, links to our bookshop.org page, where of course you'll find The Sequel and the plot, to the Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, our merch store, and our newsletter sign up. In other words, if you want to know more about anything Friends and Fiction offers, and there's a whole lot, be sure to check out friendsandfiction.com.
And we also encourage you to find our Friends and Fiction Endless Stories newsletter on Substack. Now, you can read all our free weekly posts on the Substack website or app. And if you subscribe, and we really hope you will, the post will land in your inbox so you never miss a thing. It's so much more than just an email newsletter. For paid subscribers, we offer incredible extra content, including deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests, plus monthly roundtable discussions between the 4 of us and our author friends, such as the one Patti and Ron just did with several well-known librarians about the magic and secrets of libraries. It's just $5 a month or $50 a year for the paid subscription. Remember, you can start out free and always upgrade. So check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com.
All right, everyone. Now let's welcome our friend Hanff Korelitz. So Jean is the author of 9 novels, including The Latecomer and The Plot, both of which are in development as limited series. And don't think we aren't going to ask her about that. She is also the author of You Should Have Known, which was adapted by David E. Kelley as an HBO 2020 limited series, The Undoing, that I know Mary Kay and I both watched.
We binged,
starring Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant.
Her New York Times bestselling novel Admission was adapted into the 2013 film starring Tina Fey, one of my heroes. In addition, Jean is the author of a collection of poems, The Properties of Breath, and a middle grade reader, Interference Powder.
With her husband, Irish poet Paul Muldoon, she adapted James Joyce's The Dead. I just love that. As an immersive theater piece, which was staged by New York City's Irish Repertory Theater for 3 7-week runs through 2018. And guess what is returning this fall of 2024? Jean is also the creator of Book the Writer, which runs pop-up book groups, small gatherings with authors to discuss their books.
Her novel, The Plot, was featured on The Tonight Show as the Fallon Summaries 2021 pick. I know it made that because I voted for it.
Yes.
Jean lives in New York City and has 2 grown-up children. Her new novel, The Sequel, was just released on October 1st and gives readers an anti-hero to root for while illuminating and satirizing the world of publishing in a deliciously fun and suspenseful read.
It is. Alan, can you bring Jean on to join us, please?
That was so great. I just wanted to stay wherever I was and just keep listening to it.
In the green room. You were in the green room with your champagne.
Wait, she got champagne? I didn't get any champagne.
Water, though.
Yeah. You're not the guest, Mary Kay.
Oh.
You don't get the champagne.
Damn it.
All right, Jean, welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. We are so glad to have you.
Happy to be. This is actually one of the first interviews I've done about The Sequel, so I'll be trying out all my lines on you. And if any of them are really bad, just say, don't say that again.
And then we'll cut it. And then you never have to use it again. Listen, we talked with you about the plot a couple years ago. And this novel, of course, is a sequel, literally called The Sequel. In this novel, we follow Anna Williams Bonner, the wife of Jacob from the plot. And now she is having her own literary success with a book called The Afterword. And she receives excerpts, that's the word, of a novel that was supposed to be long gone. So something has gone wrong.
Very wrong.
Very wrong. If that's what the novel is about, one of our favorite questions here is, what would you say it's really about?
Only a writer would ask that.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh, what a good question. First of all, I didn't know that I would ever write a sequel. So I didn't think about these weighty questions in advance. My big issue as I was writing it was, is she going to be punished or not? I mean, what do we really want for this person? This person's done some not very good things. And here we run into the big problem of talking about this book and talking about the plot, because even by stating that this is in fact the protagonist of the sequel, I'm already saying too much about the plot,
right?
People who haven't read it. But I mean, we're talking about somebody with very, very dubious view of the world and a kind of moral compass that may not be the same as yours or mine. And yet, I hope that by the end we at least understand a little bit more about how she got that way. What we want for her, I still haven't decided. I hadn't decided until almost the end of the book what I was going to do with her.
I love that.
Yeah.
The notion of writing a sequel is very controversial in sub-publishing quarters these days. But, you strike me as being fairly fearless in your writing.
Oh, so not true. But go ahead. Say it.
But just think that and keep going. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay. So it's 2 years after the plot came out. At what point did you decide, I want to check back in with Anna and see what's up with her? And this book is just so deliciously wicked and deeply unsettling.
It wasn't conscious at all. I mean, I think when I tried to pinpoint the moment, all I can remember was that I was packing my books to move to the apartment I live in now. It was about 2 years ago, and I was packing up my books, and the idea just popped into my head that I wondered what happened next for her. I mean, it was a big twist at the end of the plot, and I never got a chance to kind of come down from it, to sort of settle with it. And I know a lot of readers didn't either, and I just thought, what would somebody like that do next? And because she had been so disdainful of writers and so punishing about the pretensions of writers, and we all know of the pretensions of writers. There are wonderful things about being a writer. It's a great community. Some of my best friends are writers, and yet, there's a lot of stuff in our world that is eminently satirizable.
Yes.
So I thought, well, what if she wrote a novel? What would happen if she had to find out for herself how hard it is? And also what the life of a writer is like. Would she be a little nicer about the community that she had married into? Let's find out. And of course, she has to experience some of the, again, it's so difficult to talk about, some of the challenges that her late husband experienced as well. So what would happen if she got a taste of her own medicine, basically?
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, there's the very first paragraph in chapter 1. She's so disdainful. She says, this degree of whining over the mere act of sitting down at a desk or even reclining on a sofa and typing, not so hard.
Not so hard.
Not hard at all, actually. That got me in the gut. So, you've got an homage to sequels in the chapter titles with the key in the back of the book. Tell us about that. At what point did that come together?
I was on a plane. I was in the middle of writing the book. And again, I just had this idea. Well, first of all, I think chapter titles are so much fun to write. I typically wait till I'm done with the book and then reward myself by writing the chapter titles. But this time I thought, what if I made the chapter titles each the title of a sequel? It's a way of sort of saying to my fellow authors, past and present, who have set themselves this task of writing a sequel, I feel your pain. I know it's not easy, but also just a little fun for the reader. I must admit that I have not read every sequel whose title I used as a chapter title. I have not read every one of the first novels that they were sequels to. Ready Player 2 is a book I have not read. I have not read Ready Player One. It's not my genre, but it's a great title for
it is.
And then matching those titles with what happens in those chapters was just so much fun.
Now, do you have a favorite all-time sequel?
I would say Erica Jong's sequel to Fear of Flying.
Oh, I like that.
Called How to Save Your Own Life. Fantastic title for a particular chapter late in the sequel. I will say no more about that. But there were many sequel titles I couldn't use. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Obviously, you're not going to be able to affix that to a chapter in a thriller in the real world. But I think How to Save Your Own Life, which, by the way, I read without knowing it was a sequel. I was a teenager. I maybe vaguely heard of Fear of Flying, but I hadn't read it. I read this book probably because it had a very racy cover. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I loved the character. I loved Erica Jong's way of her sardonic tone. I loved how smart she was. Yeah. I just loved it. And then somebody said to me, it's a sequel, right? And so, of course, I went back and read Fear of Flying, another fantastic book. I think I would single that out as my favorite. There's also a novel called The Promise, which was a sequel to a novel called The Chosen by Chaim Potok. The Chosen was a very well-known novel. The Promise, not so much, but it did revisit the characters some years later and really kind of added to the story of who they were and what they became. So.
I noticed the first time I noticed that the chapter headings were sequels was The Shining.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. And then I found it in the back, and I love The Shining. I read enough Stephen King in college to probably get a degree in Stephen King.
I read Stephen King last week. I'm still.
Yeah, still. I finished Fairy Tale a couple weeks ago, but I didn't realize that The Shining was the sequel to Dr. Sleep. Never knew that.
Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining.
The other way around. Yes, I never knew that. Knew that.
Very good book. Also, very scary book. Oh, there's our new puppy.
Oh, new puppy alert.
Puppy.
Because I have to say, Jean, getting a new puppy right before book tour and release is genius.
Well, this puppy was being fostered in our neighborhood, so we kept running into him on the street. And when the foster parents said, he's about to go on Pet Finder and you better act fast. Yeah, we did. And they came and dropped him off this morning. And they said, you're lucky you moved so fast because we had all these people who were. The little puppy was only on Pet Finder for about a day and racked up a lot of prospective families.
Sweet. It's like Hinge for hounds.
It's a very dangerous website. And we were not looking, but we just fell for this dog. So
sweet. All right. So no fiction exists alone. I think that's part of what I feel in the book, right? Mm-hmm. We know that ideas float around. We read something or we hear something and an idea bubbles up. 2 or 3 people write about the same thing at the same time and they don't even know each other. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the universal unconscious or fate or plain old coincidence, it does happen. Mm-hmm. At one point, without spoilers, a character in the sequel says, I read about all of us. And Anna thinks to herself, I will not tell this person the difference between fiction and fact. Right? She's just so annoyed. But in this book and in the plot, you really explore this concept of artistic license, ideas around inspiration and attribution. We know what Anna thinks about all of this. Tell us about your thoughts on some of that.
Well, I mean, you just put it very well. Very central to the plot of the plot is this notion that the ideas are, nothing is original, that every idea is just floating around out there. And if you're lucky enough to be chosen by one of these ideas, you have a responsibility to it. And if you don't fulfill that responsibility, somebody else adopts the puppy, basically. And, Elizabeth Gilbert has written about this in her book, Big Magic. And there's
right there.
a fascinating story. It was right there. Yeah. Fascinating story in that book about how she was working on a book about a woman from the Midwest who goes to the Amazon to do some sort of science experiment. And there are various things going on in her life. And she just ran out of steam with this book and stopped working on it. And then a few years later, she met Anne Patchett, who had just written State of Wonder, which was basically the same plot. And the two of them put their heads together and discovered that the month that Elizabeth Gilbert had given up on her novel was the month that Anne Patchett got the idea for State of Wonder. And there's no hostility about this. You have a job to do. You have to do right by the idea that you are lucky enough to have, or has you. And I'm actually a deeply unspiritual person, so I'm not. This is maybe the most spiritual thing I do believe, that the idea comes to you. But Elizabeth Gilbert knew that she just didn't have the wherewithal to write that book. So it went to somebody else.
It is amazing. I had a book come out last year, a year and a half ago, that incorporated Operation Pied Piper. I hadn't read a single book about it. 4 books came out last year with Operation Pied Piper. It's real,
But another way to think of it is that every work of art is in conversation with every other work of art. And
love that.
If we're going to be novelists, and remember that the novel is a young art form. I mean, it dates back to the mid 1700s. That's nothing. Poetry's been around for thousands more years. But if we are going to be a practitioner of this art form, the novel, we have a responsibility to understand the history of the art form, to know where it first bubbled up, what it was like then, what's happened to it since, what's happening to it right now. I mean, there's a lot happening in the novel right now. I don't love all of it, but I respect it because it's a developing art form. So whether I am aware of it or not, if I write a novel about a whale, it is in conversation with Moby Dick. And that's true whether I've read Moby Dick or not, because Moby Dick is part of our cultural history. So the idea that you have an original idea and you've created an original work of art that exists in a vacuum, it doesn't cut any mustard with me. What do you cut? And what is that cliche?
You cut mustard.
You cut mustard with me, because I have never written anything 100% original. Every novel that I've written derives something from something I've read. And that is true for all of us.
Yeah. I like the word in conversation.
Yeah.
I was saying it doesn't exist alone, but I like in conversation better. I like that.
We're part of a tradition.
Yes.
But now in the plot, Jacob, Anna's husband, late husband, it's a little bit more than an in conversation situation.
No, he very deliberately helps himself to a story. But in his defense, he believes that this was a book that was never written. It certainly was never published, but more to the point, somebody writing a book and not publishing it, that I would say you hands off. But this is a book that he has no reason to believe was ever written.
Yeah.
And he certainly does not copy language. He has only taken the story. The same way Jane Smiley took the story of King Lear when she wrote 1,000 Acres. The same way, by the way, that Shakespeare took King Lear from another source. So, I mean, if you really want to,
Well, Damon Copperhead is David Copperfield. Like,
just
we're
read,
in conversation.
love, yeah.
Okay. So PW in a starred review says the sequel is about the publishing industry's ego parade.
Love that.
And another review says it's full of very amusing scenes of delusional writers. Now, since we're in this club together, and well, I don't know if we're in the same club, but we're in a club. You're a true veteran of the publishing industry after 8 of your own novels. And was it fun to set about skewering this world? I mean, I got to say, I chortled. I went back and reread it again at the part where Anna's agent and her late husband's agent, Matilda, is describing her own notorious slush pile of manuscripts as the black hole of Salter.
Salter being her last name.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did 1 year in publishing. I worked at Farrar, Straus and Giroux, which was an amazing experience. And part of my job was the slush pile. And you did feel great compassion for the people in that pile. And I say that even though I'm thinking of Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson, which was taken from the slush pile.
What?
Yes, it was. One of the most kind of amazing moments in publishing history. So they're better than anybody, I would say, reputation-wise on that front. And yet things are so stacked against you if you do not have an agent that, I mean, I tell people, forget it. Get an agent. Put all of your effort into getting an agent because you have no chance if you don't. But for all of that and for all the decency of most people in publishing, newsflash, not to make a lot of money.
Nope.
If, maybe not even to make a living, they're in publishing because they love books just like us. And they are hoping, if not to write that great book, at least to find that great book. They are looking for that great book. That is the most meaningful thing that they dream of doing. And yet there's a lot of pretension in publishing as well. So I feel like I'm an equal opportunity satirizer. And I can't say I didn't have fun doing it. I'm sorry. I had fun.
It was fun reading it. So yeah.
Yeah,
it goes both ways.
There's so much about the writer's everyday life in this book, especially during book tour. And then there's some back and forth between about who's a real writer and who isn't, because Anna talks about there are artist colonies and MFAs and writers' workshops and reviews and NYT pieces. And Anna's editor reminds Anna, hey, you're a writer. You make things up. Which is truer than Anna's editor knows.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Where do you fall, Jean? Is there some distinction between a real writer and one who isn't? Do you have a thought on that topic?
Oh, I have many thoughts on it.
Give them to us.
I was going to say, spill the tea.
Well, I often have to issue a warning before I start talking about genre because I don't think people are all that interested in genre, but I'm a little obsessed with it. And I think the reason for that is that I started my writing life as a literary novelist, but I failed to get a publisher for either of my first 2 novels. Then I had a baby and I felt time shrinking. I felt like I have to write something that somebody will publish. And I did. And I wrote a legal thriller and it was published. And that was a wonderful moment. But almost immediately I had a different problem, which was that my publisher wanted me to actually write a sequel. She wanted me to write a lot of sequels. It was an AS for alibi kind of situation she had in mind. And I thought, no, I mean, I'm a literary novelist. And I felt like I was being shown the door marked genre. And I just didn't want to go through that door. And so I had to give up my hard-won publisher and go in a different direction. But along the way, I had discovered that I actually love plot and I love being surprised by a book and I loved surprising people. Yeah. So that is basically the reason why I then spent the next 2 decades, dovetailing back and forth between, genre fiction and literary fiction. And I was lucky enough to finally find a home with an agent and an editor who were going to stay with me no matter which side of the line my next book landed on. And that was just the single greatest thing that could have happened. Because I can't decide. I mean, The Latecomer and The Plot, published 1 year apart, are about as different from each other as any 2 books I've ever written. Yeah. So I'm addicted to being surprised and to surprising the reader, whether it's in a genre or literary context.
I love that.
Can't help myself.
Well, we have to write what we're curious about and care about. You can't be dictated, to care about something that you don't.
Yeah. But it has left me with a bit of a kind of obsession with what is genre? What shelf? Do you go into a bookstore and say, what shelf am I on this time?
Yeah.
I did in the beginning because I was straight genre. And then when I adopted a pen name when I wanted to step out of that noose.
Yeah.
I wrote the same kind of book, but they marketed it differently.
Yep.
And they put it on a different shelf.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, if they find me and they read it and they love it.
Yeah.
But there is when people ask, what do you write? I always go, I was going to say novels. I don't know.
Some people,
what kind?
Some people say that. Listen, I'm just thrilled that you want to read the book.
Yep. I write stories. Okay. I want to talk more about Anna because she is one of the most powerfully disturbed fictional characters I've read since Patricia Highsmith.
What can you mean?
The talented Mr. Ripley. And I don't think that actually it was Mary Kay who noticed that little Easter egg where the name of the defunct university is called Ripley.
Yeah. Yeah.
We found that. So Anna's voice dominates the novel. It's totally narrated by her. Mm-hmm. At one point, something terrible happens to her and she vomits. And then she thinks, I must be upset, which is so disconnected from emotions. We normally think I'm so upset and then get sick, right? So is she a sociopath or a psychopath or just a ruthlessly efficient victim?
Well, I got my psychology PhD the same place I got my MFA, which was nowhere. So I diagnosed her. But I would say that what really motivates Anna, and looking back, what has always motivated her is she just wants to be left alone. And all of her troubles in life have really sprung from people trying to interfere with her life. Yes. And in some ways that are not to name them, but front and center in this presidential election, you might say. Yes. But also, how many of us would just like to be left alone to live our lives? And I think if that had happened with Anna, then the body count, for example, would be a lot smaller, if not zero. But people just would not leave her alone. So, I mean, who among us cannot sympathize with that situation?
Well, that's the genius about making us actually understand her. Even as we are maybe flipping the pages going, wicked, wicked, we understand where Yeah, we understand where it's coming from. So after being in the mind and the heart of Jacob, how was it to switch to Anna's point of view? What was it like to write about the inner life of this aggrieved writer?
Well, Jake leads with fear. I mean, he's a fearful guy. He's fearful before he's successful. He's even more fearful after he's successful. Yeah. For a guy who spent most of his adult life desperately wanting to be a successful writer, he has no opportunity to enjoy the experience when it finally arrives because he's too terrified. It's not that Anna is terrified. She just wants to understand what is happening to her so that she can take care of it and go on with her life. And, again, who can blame her for that, really? They're very different people, obviously. It was a lot of fun to write about. I mean, I've never killed anybody.
Did her voice come to you quickly? Because it is such a voice, and you are carried along like a river with her language and her kind of personality. And by the first or second chapter, you know who she is.
Yeah.
Was it easy to find that voice and run that river with her, or
it's really horrible to admit that it wasn't that hard?
Okay.
What does that say about me? No, I mean,
that you inhabited your character that you already knew from the plot. It's awesome.
I mean, like in The Latecomer, there's a character who's a kind of a right winger, and he's, if he were a real person, he'd probably be wearing a MAGA hat. And I loved writing about him, even though, very, very different in real life, because, there's always something in the person that you can understand.
Yeah.
I get it. Like,
yeah.
Why are you that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we interviewed you for the plot. I can remember me saying to you, there's just no sympathetic character in this book. And you said to me, and I have not forgotten it.
She talks about it a lot.
Oh dear. What did I say?
You said it's not my job to make you like my character. Mm-hmm. It's my job to explore her and tell you about her. And
that sounds awful. I mean,
no, it's truer than true. Yeah. It's important. We talk about it a lot.
Well, I've never had that feeling in reading a book that I was unhappy because a character would not have been to my taste if they had been a real person. I have certain criteria for the real people in my life. They need to be good people.
But not in a novel.
But on the page, no. I mean, the bar is a lot lower.
Yeah.
So
as long as they're interesting, right?
As long as they're interesting.
Yeah. As long as the pages keep turning.
Yep. Yeah. Which they were and are. Yep.
All right. Let's talk about switching gears, and let's switch gears. So in our Friends in Fiction interview for the Substack newsletter, which everybody will now go out and subscribe to, we asked you what you would be if you weren't a writer, and you said, an antique dealer. Flea markets and junk stores are my happy places, which happens to be my go-to place also.
Yeah, I see your shelf. It says Beach Town. You probably picked that up at a flea market.
No, actually, I have a book called Beach Town, and somebody made it for me. But,
but her house is chock full. She's been in country living and cottage living.
Well, Jean's been in. Which magazine were you in? Living? Yeah, I thought I'd seen you in Country Living.
That was a bucket list thing for me. I love country living.
I do too, and I'm so sad. It's they basically are chopping up old content and putting it together in bite-sized patties and putting it back out, which is kind of sad. All right, do you think that junking feeds your creativity?
Well, my husband came home yesterday, and I had an old chair up on the table, and I was repairing the back of it because I didn't like the fabric that was on the back of it. And I have a whole stack of like old linen. So I guess, when you're shoving old linen into an old chair frame with an old butter knife, probably that's true. But yeah, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a new thing, that I didn't prefer the old thing of. Everything in my home is old, except maybe the laptop that I'm speaking to you on. And we moved about a year and a half ago. We did get new couches. That was the first new furniture that I had purchased in 27 years.
Wow.
I'm very proud of that statistic.
That's really
what
great.
do you love? But what do you love about antiquing or junking? What is it that revs your rockets?
I love surfaces of things. There's this he's still alive. He's a man named John T. Kirk. He was a scholar of antique furniture, and he wrote these two books, I believe in the 70s or 80s, One was called the Impecunious Antiques Restorer, and one was called the Impecunious Home Restorer. And I read the Home Restorer book first, and he's such a curmudgeon that when the power people come to install electricity in his home, he's full of, rules about where they're allowed to put, not the generator, but you see how I'm not very good at this kind of thing, but like where the wires are going to go and where the outdoor unit is going to go. And finally the guy looks and he's like, what's the matter with you? Don't you want electricity? And the guy says basically, not really. But he was the man who invented the phrase, buy it ratty and leave it alone. So remember in Antiques Roadshow when we used to watch, the Kino twins informing.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody who brought their Connecticut Valley Highboy in, and the Kino twins are like, this is 250 years old and it's made by the great maker, this and that. And would you like to know how much it's worth? And then they would say, yes, you want to know how much it's. Well, if you hadn't refinished it, it would be worth $250,000. But since you refinished it, it's worth 12.
Yeah.
And that is buy it ratty and leave it alone. And that is my mantra in most things.
Love it.
Yeah, I think the only thing I like new are mattresses.
Yeah, mattresses are.
I like a new mattress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love that you guys love it so much. So I'm going to take a far left here. I want to talk about the big screen instead of the magazine. So much of your work has found its way to the screen, and I've seen some of it. So tell us what it's like to see your work come to life in that way. And will we see the plot or the sequel up there too?
Well, knock on very old patinaed wood, which you can't see.
Ratty wood. Yeah.
Very ratty wood. Yeah, I mean, things got very messed up by the writer's strike and the actor's strike. The producer of both projects was explaining to me last week, she was here in New York, just all the ways that things are derailed and, people who might have been producing your show don't exist anymore, things like that. But I feel pretty good about both of them. The plot still has Mahershala Ali attached to it, and he's apparently, all on board and moving forward with that. The Latecomer has a great pilot script written now, and I think they're going to go to studios with that in the next few months. So yeah, forward motion on both. As far as what it feels like taking your child and throwing them off a cliff.
Oh my gosh, I would imagine.
No, I personally have not thrown a child off a cliff, nor would I, but it is a process of letting go, and you can either be upset when you see that film or TV show and realize how far it's traveled from your book, or you can say, hey, different art form, different practitioners, this is their work, not my work. My work is between the covers, and be very zen about it.
Well, I think if I had Hugh Grant catching my baby at the bottom of the cliff, I'd probably feel a lot better. I got to tell you that.
I'm dying to ask about that helicopter scene at the end, but I'm not going to.
Not in the book.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the TV show after the second episode went in a totally different direction. And on the final night, before the final episode aired, and it was the only episode I hadn't seen. They were very careful about releasing it. I sat there on the couch with my husband, and I said to him, who do you think did it? And he said, who do you think did it? And we were both wrong.
Wow. And you wrote it. So that's crazy.
But that's okay. David E. Kelley, I've been watching his work since the 1980s, LA Law. And, whatever he wants to do is fine.
Yes. With you, it's totally fine. Is there a sequel to the sequel?
Oh.
It feels like there could be. I can tell you that.
I would put money on it. Yeah.
Okay. I would think so.
I mean, there is.
I guess I would hope so, because I want more. So.
I think that's a good investment.
I agree. Okay. I'm putting my money on the table then. Okay, Jean, stick around because we have a couple other questions, but we have a few quick reminders for everyone out there.
For all of you watching and listening, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies of the sequel so you can meet the villainous Anna. The perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll be getting the book at a discount, and you're helping fund our show, which we would like that to have happen, all while supporting our guests like Jean and our beloved indie booksellers nationwide.
We also want to remind you to follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group, which now has 250,000. And for those of you who aren't math girls like me, that's 250,000. Yeah. When you visit friendsandfiction.com, you can stay up to date about everything we have going on and sign up for our Substack, where you will get bonus content from Jean. So, Jean, can you tell us what you're working on now?
I'm actually working on a screenplay.
Nice.
First time I've written anything for the screen, and the producer of both The Plot and The Latecomer gave me this opportunity to write an original screenplay, and it's like going to school all over again. It uses totally different muscles than our fiction muscles. Wow. And I knew it was going to be hard, and it's been even harder than I thought it would be. But I wanted to learn, and I'm pushing forward with it. And that's what I'm doing. The other thing, and you mentioned this, is that The Dead 1904 is about to come back. In fact, we have our first rehearsal in about 2 weeks, and we're not even fully cast yet.
Oh, whoops.
We've announced 2 great cast members, and one is Estelle Parsons, a great actress, stage and film actress. The other is Mary Beth Peel, who was on The Good Wife. She played Alicia's mother-in-law on The Good Wife, and she's a wonderful actress. So the Dead takes place at the home of these 2 elderly sisters in Dublin in 1904, and these 2 amazing actresses are going to play the sisters. And so that's the big project of the next 3 months. Yeah.
When will that be on the stage?
So it's not actually a stage. It's immersive. So we stage it at a mansion on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
Oh, and I want to go for the opening. I need to know when this is.
Opening night is November 20th. We run through January 5th, and we serve dinner in the middle of the show, because when you come to the show, you are a guest at the party. Oh. So it's an immersive experience, and you're in 1904 Dublin in this period appropriate mansion. And the food is amazing. We have this great caterer, and they basically took James Joyce's descriptions of the feast and they translated it into the 21st century. So the food is just wonderful.
I think I see a Friends and Fiction road trip. Mary Kay just got back from Dublin.
Oh, yeah. Well, what you'll eat at our show is better than anything you ate in Dublin. Don't tell me.
Okay, Jean, tell everybody out there how they can connect with you and where readers can find you online and on book tour.
Well, I have a website, hanffkorelitz.com, and I do my best with keeping all the events current on that. I am not on Facebook. I have never been able to understand Facebook. I left Twitter when a certain tech mogul took it over. I said, I'm out. But I am on Instagram, and I'm very reachable on Instagram and through my website.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Jean, thank you so much for joining us today. Gosh, we love talking about this sequel and being writers and where ideas come from. And what's the difference between a socio and psychopath? We still don't know. But we loved talking to you. Thank you for being with us on the Friends and Fiction
All right.
show.
And Mary Kay, I'll see you at the Morristown.
I know. I wish we were going to have time to do a little junking.
Oh, gosh. Me too. Well, I can see where the nearest Goodwill is, and we can hit it.
Perfect. We'll do a little thrift haul.
Oh, awesome. That'd be great.
Everybody, be sure to tune in next week when Kristy and I are going to welcome Sophie Kinsella to discuss her new novel, What Does It Feel Like? That show will air on the Friends and Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, October 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it will be published on our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, October 11th.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us, and we will see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.